There are a few things that you should be checking on your Avata 2 before you start flying. Now these checks are only going to take you a few seconds, but those few seconds could save you from a potential disaster. Now a quick show of hands. How many of you have ever just gone out to the flying field, taken the drone out the bag, and then just sent it up in the air? Yep, we've all done it, and I used to do this when I first started flying drones a few years ago. But now I just take a few extra seconds to do a few quick checks just to make sure that my drone is not only going to be safe, but also able to capture the stunning footage that I have in mind. Now to go along with this video, I also have a post-crash checklist, things you need to do a bit more of an in-depth check on if you've had a crash, but this is the pre-flight checks, so let's get into it. The first couple of checks are checks you need to do before you even leave the house. Now the first one, you don't have to do this every single time, but do this every couple of weeks, and it's plugging the drone and goggles in to the DJI Fly app to see if there's any new firmware updates available. Firmware updates are going to be continually released on the Avata 2, and to keep your drone up to date with all the current safety features, it's best to update it whenever a firmware update comes out. And the second thing you want to be doing when you're at home is checking that the area you're planning to go and fly in is somewhere you're actually allowed to fly in, and that the weather is also going to be suitable. Don't just head out to the field and then all of a sudden a rainstorm comes in. If you could have known about this rainstorm coming in before you set out to fly, you probably would have just waited to a different time or a different day and had a better experience. And the sun is just peeping through the leaves and blinding me. I thought it was going to be out of the way. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get my controller out of the bag, whichever one I'm going to be using. I'm going to start off with the FPV3 controller, so I'm going to put my gimbal sticks on, and then I'm just going to move the gimbals in all directions to make sure there's no play or there's no binding going on and everything feels nice and smooth. Then I'm just going to flick my switches, make sure they all move nicely, and just toggle the scroll wheel. All I'm doing here is just making sure that nothing has gone wrong during storage, nothing has got stuck, and everything is working as it should. So I'm going to do the same with the motion controller. If I'm using that, I'm going to play with the trigger, make sure it's moving nice and freely. Same with the joystick on the top, and then all the buttons should be fine, but give them a quick press just to make sure. Okay, so now I'm going to start checking the drone. I'm going to start with the underside, and I'm going to start at the back. So I'm going to have a look at all the sensors back here, the visual position sensors and these downward facing sensors. I'm basically just checking that they're not damaged and they're not dirty. If there's any dirt or grime on them, I'm going to wipe it off just so they can work as best they can. Then I'm going to have a look at the frame, a quick visual inspection. If I haven't had a crash or anything, the chances are this is going to be undamaged, but you still just want to have a quick look just to make sure. Then have a look at the propellers from underneath, make sure there's no chips, no bits missing, they're undamaged as well. And then whilst you're here, have a look at the SD card slot. If you're using an SD card, make sure there's one in there. It's not so vital on the Avata 2 because we do have that 46 gigs of internal storage, but if you're using an SD, make sure it's in there. So we're then going to move onto the top side of the drone. I'm going to start with the propellers. So again, I'm going to give them a quick spin, check from the top to make sure they're undamaged, and spinning the propellers just lets me know that they're not going to hit the guards, so that lets me know the guards are undamaged and the arms are likely undamaged. One other thing you can do is if you just grab them and just give them a bit of a twist and a pull, it just lets you know that they're not loose. If they've come loose, which is quite unlikely, you can just tighten them up using the provided tool. Then I'm going to move on to the front of the drone. I'm going to start checking the camera system. So I'm just going to have a quick look at the lens, make sure the lens is clean and undamaged. If I haven't had a crash, it should be perfectly fine. If I'm using my gimbal protector, everything here should be safe. And I'm also just going to have a quick look at the gimbal rubbers here just to make sure everything is still connected. It's really easy to see and everything here looks fine. Next, I'm just going to check the battery. I'm going to make sure it's fully inserted. If in doubt, take it out, push it back in so it clips in, nice and secure. And then I'm also just going to check to make sure that I have enough battery power for the planned flight. And along with checking the battery on the drone, I also want to check the battery on my goggles and my radio to make sure they're all fully charged and have enough power for the day ahead. The next thing you want to do is now power on all of your equipment and then let the drone sit so it can get a good GPS fix. So I'm going to do that with mine, and then I'm going to show you what to do next. So once we've got the goggles on our head, we need to make sure that our antennas have been flicked up. This is going to give us the best possible reception, and also just make sure that you're sort of facing in the average direction of where you're going to be flying. That's going to give you the best signal reception. Okay, so everything is now turned on. I've got a good GPS fix and there's no error messages showing up in my goggles. So what I'm going to do now is I always do the first flight. I start off in normal mode, and I'm just going to take the drone off and listen to make sure that everything sounds okay, and just watch to make sure the drone is behaving how it should. So if I take the drone off now, we can just have a quick check and see what's going on. So I'm going to bring it up so you can see it. Okay, so all I'm going to do here is I'm just watching the drone. It looks to be holding position perfectly. It's holding altitude correctly. There's no strange noises coming from it. I can't hear like the motors and the propellers hitting anything. Everything seems nice and smooth, and it sounds like it normally does. So I'm more than happy in this instance to send it away and start enjoying my first flight of the day. So there you go. You see, it only takes a few seconds to do those quick checks just to make sure that our drone is going to be safe and fit to fly for the day ahead. Now, if you have just had a crash and you need to know what to check in more detail, go and check out this video right here. It's going to give you the post-crash checklist. And if you're new to the Avata 2, you should go and check out this video right here. It's full of really useful hints and tips to get you going. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.